We'll get started. Thank you. Obviously, we've got a fairly lengthy agenda for our briefing. So first item is board agenda.
Just to add the briefing about Bureau.
On that, or have a train. Thank you. So we've 4 minutes up. We'll go on to rate modelling. Oh, sorry to interrupt you. I have a drink. Hydrates. Sorry, Darren, I'm assuming you've started the recording.
I think so.
Where is Darren? In the cloud.
He's in the cloud.
You'll text me in a minute.
He's in the cloud. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Just this is our second workshop, and I apologise for the date on the first slide is incorrect. Okay. So basically, going back historically, in our long-term financial plan, we have a number of principles going forward, and this is just to recap on those. So we've got ongoing sustainability measures and budget constraints as for each year. We've introduced full cost attribution to our external services, and they relate to about $5.1 million of expenditures, which is relocated back down to those, and then include the curbside collection, community wastewater management schemes. And with the phasing over those recovering all those costs as far as are in line with scopes and principles. So what we had in the draft budget, we've got a 2.9% estimated CPI, and obviously that was from the reserve date forecast, which were released in February. On the 6th of May, they review those forecasts for the next 2.5 years, and they're broken up into each financial year, or basically broken up to each 6 months. We've had a 1.74% sustainability, which is the last sustainability that we've had in our long-term financial plan, after having many of those previously. And that is, say, 4.64% for existing properties, and at the moment we're sitting at new developments of 0.95%.
Like with the new developments, we only budgeted in our long-term financial plan for 0.5, didn't we? Can we offset the 0.45 to that sustainability? Cost of living and fuel and stuff is really hurting people.
Possibly, or it might be a bit depending on what happens with the forecasts in May as well. So something to keep in the wings, but also to keep mind in what new CPI will be forecast for 2026-27. So let me to the next screen. Looks like I'm on the right track. So that's just a comparison of what we had in the long-term financial plan versus what we've got in the draft.
The 2.6 is in the current plan, February 2.9 forecast CPI. Is that?
So on the right-hand side, what I'm working with at the moment is the 2.9% from the RBA forecast, which was released in February. Obviously, there was no issues with conflict at that stage. And like new development, there's a difference of 0.45%, which gives you the overall different in general rates of 0.75%. But in reality, what happens with CPI basically gets flushed not only through the income but all the expenses as the expectation of what will occur in the future that financial year. So just to touch on service charges, we're going out to public consultation. That was an agenda item today. which will have substantial increases, but they will be phased in over 5 years and capped at a maximum of $250. It's averaging a $190 increase for those schemes at the moment for the new financial year, 2025 and 26, 27. Roadside collection, I haven't crunched the numbers yet. I'm yet to flow some other figures that lead up to that. And the uncertainty of future costs of fuel and the period of heightened costs is an issue when I'll finally calculate that.
With that one, the roadside waste collection, I think I said it last time, like if there's a huge FCA, then the savings are somewhere else in the budget. So should that be offset on the rate? Because at the moment, the rate payers are paying the full cost attribution on the rubbish collection. Then we're going to add it to a service charge. So somewhere there should be a decrease in the rate. That's similar to the swims, where we're now collecting that full cost attribution. There's got to be some savings somewhere.
So user pays, there's more costs being taken from those people, which are benefiting from the surface. So you're correct,
Yes, I'd like to see wherever we've found those savings can offset against that sustainability or something, because it's a long-term saving that it's going to be paid by the user charges from now on.
And I think that's shown generally through our results which have occurred and the projections that we're doing. So, and once again, the show also once we finish the final modelling, I think that can be basically a spin-off. So we need to, there'll be a bit of a revisit to those previous amounts in the previous slides. So just to talk about valuation change, I had some figures last fortnight for you. And then what's happening? So this is just core evaluation changes. So ones that really stick out, residential average value per property has increased by 10% on that far right-hand column. And also the other one, which is a lot of interest, is prime reduction has increased by 5%. So therefore, the average increase for those categories will be influenced by those valuation increases. So previously, people have asked me down the bottom what other is. So I actually had a look what the other category contains. And once again, they're Renewable. It contains public utilities, electricity, water, sewage, gas, institutions such as schools, churches, hospitals, community facilities, recreations, areas such as parks, sports, clubs, reserves, and that includes water reserves, quarries, etc., public halls and mining that we have none of. So the next slide then looks at the increase per rating category. So we looked at the valuations before, now we're looking at the rates increase of the per category. So obviously, because of residential get such an increase. So what I've done is previously, on the previous screen, I looked at the average, what the average would be, an average property. So just the total amount divided by the property. And the amount of properties can change from one year to another. Like we see residential, we've gone from the top left corner there. So, does it show up on the screen? No, that's
bad.
Yeah, it's up right at the top. You're above it. It's up above it. That doesn't go on the screen.
You go to a team screen.
It's too high.
Won't go on the screen.
TV screen.
The TV is the screen.
I could get up there like a
Yes,
Okay.
I'm not running it.
Carol,
Of course, yes. So it's in the top left corner.
old school. Yeah.
Let's go.
I get the pointer out.
Oh yeah, the pointer.
Top left.
Residential went from 5,744, and then New Year went to 5,857. So when I'm doing So I'm just I'm averaging the total valuation by the number of properties. Sure.
Hang on.
No.
Yes.
Yep. And here where I'm saying capital value change, it's just the total valuation change for the whole category. I'm not talking about per property. So, when you see percentages change from one to another, I suppose it's, you got to understand how I'll calculate those in different instances. Yep. So basically, residential will contribute a larger piece of the pie, and other areas such as production, like we just discussed before, their piece of the pie will decrease because of that additional change. Yep.
The second last column is the average dollar per property based on what the modelling is.
Every residential now is terrible. On that, I think last year we talked about the possibility of changing the vacant land rather than them paying 100%, paying more. A lot of councils are doing it. And also, I think we talked about commercial shop, which also would increase marina berths. And I've noticed a couple of councils talking about primary production due to this drought, in that a number of very wealthy primary producers are receiving a 10% rebate, or in other councils it's like 20%. Is there a way that you could offset it so that wealthy primary producers can't get a rebate and others that need it more could get double? Like,
how are we going to
my question, could it be on application rather than so that the ones that need it are benefiting?
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have access to the ATO records.
Reason for that.
Yeah.
But it's unfair that people in the city, the residential ones that are paying 6.6% more, who can't afford it and are deciding whether they get a loaf of bread or a carton of milk, are paying more rates, and then a wealthy, I know one of the wealthy farmers.
It's some corporate,
corporates, they're getting 10% discount that these residential people are paying the gap, because if it's not collected from one, it's just And like I said, I've been watching a couple of councils, and it'll be interesting to see how they play out. I'll keep watching with interest.
So the bottom line is we'd have to change the rate.
But I don't even know how you can do that.
Sorry, for the rating part, our rating policy change, you can look at the vacant land, loading that up where it's a higher percentage than just the base rate. So it'd be 1.2, 1.5, some have double the base rate for vacant land. So people don't bank that. I don't know of a way of finding or distinguishing in prime production. And once again, prime production, you'll have a whole you've basically got a whole mixture of different industries within prime production. You've got the grape growers, you've got grain growers, you've got mixed farming, you've got graziers. So it's unfortunately that's the level of rating categories which is available to us. Previous councils, we've lobbied really hard for intensive industries within prime production, and we got big pushback from the state government about that.
Obviously, at the moment, we're restricted to land use. We can dictate.
Locality, land use and zoning is probably about the only factors that you've got to be able to bring that into it, unless you can somehow target rebate.
That's what we need. Charge them 100% and then say, hey, primary producers with X amount of income or assets can apply for a 10% or 20% because you'd have more money to play with.
I'm pushing regards to that, I guess, because primary production land can also be involving the residents, right? It's a home on that primary production land, and it could be primary production land with a few multiple farmhouses on there and maybe not producing anything.
It's the primary use of the property, so it'd have to be reasonably material. So that, Joe then looks at it, and you can object to your land use if you want to. But basically, and councils can, if they've got enough evidence, they can actually change the land use for rating purposes. So as we've seen with B&Bs, some other councils have said, no, that's a residential property. but we're going to treat it as a commercial property. But their commercial rate dollar is higher than residential. We've got a flat rate at the moment across those.
Would there be many primary producing properties that have their residents on a separate title? I know some, but
I think that would be very rare for my experience.
And I mean, depend on the size of the enterprise too. So, smaller ones probably not, but larger ones possibly, yeah.
because I do know some. But
And certainly some of those historically have been when a farmer has purchased the next property and they subdivided off the house and land, so they can try and sell that separately because they're already public. And having a house with improvements can vary the value quite a lot, and my brother-in-law has taken roofs off 2 buildings to ensure that they're valued to be straight.
That's a cheeky word.
That's what they do. Making ruins.
So talk about the notes changed there. So I'll just go to the next slide. So this is basically a summary of both the capital changes and the rates raised. It's another way of looking at it, another view. Total capital value change, total net rate increase for that category, and the average increase per property. So, and I'll send this presentation to you, obviously. So in previous years, and I've just got 2 samples here, due to Councillor Barber asked me previously, how does that, within one department, within one category, how does that affect different properties? So this is an example of residential with our graph rating model. So basically what you got is the yellow represents the average value of the property. And then going up, we've got the percentages 100, 200%. Well, if you had a property which is twice the average, what would that mean, and what dollar increase and what percentage increase we did have? And in the opposite, as you go down the table from yellow, if you only got the 75% value of the average property, what would happen to your rates there? And then sooner or later, you get into, so if you look at the last 2 lines, you would see that they're both 1,074. That's because it's hit minimum rates. Okay. And then I've got just another example. I've got prime production. I've got an example there as well. So, and once again, if you look on the far right-hand side, you say, hold on, Clive had an average and it wasn't 1.8%. As you look down lower, you get to the minimum rates. So the minimum rates takes a 4.7. So if you kind of take those minimum rates and all the ones which are above the minimum rates, that's how you get the other percentage.
Okay.
So it's kind of like, with this averaging out, And I've got all the other tables for all the other land use types as well. Okay. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Clive. Any questions? Well done. Still 4 minutes in front. Go on to Swan Reach Boat Ramp upgrade project. Stay.
That's 4 minutes. Just before this one comes up, the basis of this is a report will come to council on the Swan Reach Boat Ramp upgrade. You've had a presentation once before about, I suppose, the future proofing of the area. What we're looking at doing is obviously we've been successful in a group of funding, and we're going through another funding process through SAPTAC, and we're looking at council putting a contribution towards that. And when you start reading the figures in this project, they've actually been independently third-party quantified by way of a different way of putting boat ramp in. It was by Copperdine. We'd look at a different process. So when you look at the figures, they're actually quite extreme, but we believe there'll be savings in the project overall.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, the basis, the background is we committed to the project with due funding, doing a $100,000 investigation. We've been able to undertake that, and now we have a detailed design. That detailed design has been funded now by due again, $1.3 million. $1.3 million will look at doing some car park work and a dual boat ramp. Won't complete the whole project. So we're looking at doing that, and obviously we've got until about the end of the financial year to spend the $1.3 million. We're actually looking at getting an extension on that because we don't want to be building a boat ramp over summer in the seasonal period. So we're looking at
Not just in not this financial year, the next financial year.
yeah, we don't want to build it during December, like the calendar year, but we're looking at
So the funding we've got is till the end of next financial year.
no, it's till December this year. The due funding's 1.3 million is till December.
Okay.
But then what we're doing is we're looking at getting setback funding to double up on our opportunities. So we're looking at extending the due funding, obviously because of the timelines of producing a boat ramp at Swan Reach. And the fact is we'll obviously have to build a temporary boat ramp in the meantime. We'll do something so there is still access to the river. What we've been able to do is package up another part of the project and provide a submission to SADFAC. There's the South Australian Boating Facility Advisory Committee to look at a best practical approach to stage one. So, as I said, with the due funding, we're looking at the two-lane boat ramp to accommodate fluctuating river levels, not every river level that we've ever experienced to, but it's also looking at improving the safety and efficiency of that area. We're also looking at using setback funding and due funding together to then create a central floating pontoon with guided access, integrated precinct, landscaping works, and also car parking. So when you start looking at packaging all that up as one major project, and the stage one will come up on a plan very shortly. Basically, it's all in the Riverland, in the river precinct by the bowling club land. We've been in talks with the bowling club because obviously there's land acquisition issues associated with it. The eligible projects are around about $4.3 million. Total projects about 4.9. We've looked at 1.3 from due, which we've secured, and now we're looking at 2.9 from SADFAC. And SADFAC in their application grant obviously want a contribution from council. Now, the breakdown of that is looking at a cash contribution of $100,000 towards the actual project. And then there's $245,000 estimated on doing some other works around that precinct, which doesn't come under any funding agreement. So that's obviously, we have to make some changes to the deep river mooring, extend the car park into the current green space, and some landscaping works around that area and riverbank works. So we've got the 1.3 confirmed. We're actually obviously had to construct by 31st of December. We're looking at a extension to that, and we can't spend our $1.3 million of due and then have SADFAC coming behind to do it. We have to package it all as one go.
Yeah.
So that's just a breakdown of basically the funding through SADFAC. We've submitted the grant application. CEO, myself, and Kieran Glenn, our engineer, packaged up a presentation. They actually were very responsive to, I suppose, the overall precinct, where we started looking at Glen White Reserve as a future and also the bowling club as a future. This is looking at stage one, which is right at the boat ramp itself. And it's been to the committee and we're waiting on the outcome. So we don't know what the outcome is at this point in time. So council contribution, we're obviously looking at putting a report to council to seek $100,000 and we'll work out where we may be able to resource that from. And then $245 to fund non-essential grant ineligible items that would then enhance the project. We obviously want to be able to demonstrate readiness and a commitment and then start stage one if the setback funding is successful to complete a boat ramp project.
Can I ask a question? The 100 grand, the 1.3 million due,
yep.
That's not contingent on any council contributions. That delivers something. We've gone for another 2.9 million from SADFAC.
Yes.
And what we're suggesting, we'll be asking councillors for a $100,000 contribution towards that to deliver that package of works.
Yes.
And then there's another 245 that's not eligible for any funding through due or SADFAC. That would value add to the project over the period of time. And that will be presented to council for consideration. Now, those things, don't necessarily have to happen as part of the due or the SABFAC, but it value adds to the project.
That's it, yeah. And with the deep river mooring, we're also looking at putting another dolphin in, which would actually then enhance the main larger river traffic as well. So yeah, there's a few things that would actually make that impressive. Dolphin is Paul. Not actually a dolphin.
Dolphins in the
That'll be a tourism project.
They used to come all the way up here and apparently
This is a non-speaking dolphin.
Murray Bridge, Taxifania, we have the dolphins.
Yeah, dolphins and sharks.
That's right, yeah.
Longevity of that dolphin.
Please bring the dolphins.
Just a, not to labour the point, but so 100 grant contribution complements 3 to 4.2 million bucks, basically.
Exactly, yes.
As a contribution to the project. And then the extra 245 would also then add value add to it over a longer period of time.
Yes, and we're looking at a similar process for the Blanchetown. Once this is one done as well, we went to SABFAC with Blanchetown and Swan Reach. SABFAC wanted to keep them both separate, so we're looking at the same sort of proposal with what we're doing at Swan Reach, and then applying that to the Blanchetown.
And it's contingent on success of the funding as well. Like if we don't get the SABFAC funding, then the contribution obviously is not there.
Yeah.
We go back to what we deliver with 1.3 million, which it won't be anything like what we're thinking.
And we'd be relying on the due funding coming forward to actually then enhance that project if we're able to. And we don't know how successful that will be.
Whether the next stage is the due.
And that 245 that we're going to do, that's non-eligible. Steve, can you give me an example of what that would look like? Like, is it trees? Is it?
It's encouraging into the current green space to widen the car park area. So the car park area is very limited.
Yep.
So we've got to make the car park deeper to get traffic trailers in as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have to modify the footpath for the deep river mooring because that was DDA compliant when we put it in. So we'll have to shorten that off and do landscaping area around there. The other dolphin in the river would then align, say, like the Proud Mary to pull up as well, because the Princess can pull up quite easily. The Proud Mary has difficulties pulling up that area, so we'll be able to work with and I suppose enhance the deep river mooring as well.
Lovely. Thank you.
And periods of time, this financial year, next financial year, depending on our result this year, Clive, because that's looking potentially positive.
And SABFAC funding has a longer term, so we can actually then expend the due funding in a certain time frame and build what we need to, then use the SABFAC funding to actually stage the project on the ground. So there is a way we can work around.
I just have a little question in regards to dolphins. You just said about for the Proud Mary or the Murray Princess coming in and they can, but Proud Mary can't, because they're both private businesses. Like with Zealand, do we ever look at like sort of financial contributions from those businesses to help the infrastructure for the boats to come in on those dolphins? Like, I'm not saying they pay for the project.
We have in the past, and we used to get a fee for here every day, backstage. But their response will be we're generating tourism for the region.
True, but
And would you like us to stop in Lake Green?
yeah, okay.
I'm being
Yeah,
somewhat
I hear what you're saying.
facetious, but
I hear what you're saying.
I'm not saying that's
But
right.
we're
Actually,
putting in something just specifically for them as well. So hey, that dolphin's not going to be utilised by me pulling up my boat. It's going to be reserved for them, right?
I mean, like, we don't have to stop there.
Yes, true.
That's right. Yeah.
When we put the deep river mooring in, Proud Mary did come and see us and said, well, they were having difficulties. Mind you, they travel about 10 metres behind each other. That's one of the problems. But they had trouble pulling in there to actually marry up with them. We said, well, it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and they said exactly that.
Yeah.
They had no money. They were running on the shoestring budget at the time. So unfortunately, there was no commercial.
but we can inquire again.
No. It's really count that.
But we also use it for our own vessels as well.
Do we? Oh, okay. All right. So we do have our own personal use for it as well. Okay, just that was the question I had, I guess. So we're putting something just for them as a business. It'd be nice to see if they could have some contribution. But if we're using for the Marion and for our boats as well, then kind of early. Maybe.
Can you just refresh my memory as to when the SABFAC funding is to be announced if we're successful?
Imminently. Is our awareness.
Okay.
Sorry, our understanding. We don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone through the committee. We don't know what the recommendation is to the minister on what projects get up. So it'll be a ministerial announcement.
Okay.
We just so clear. So stage one is we just have to present a proposal, and then they make a decision whether it should go to stage two. That happened, and so then we put a stage two application, and that is what's been, and then it goes to the minister for approval.
So just looking at the overall footprint.
It doesn't work on that screen.
Right. So basically where the existing boat ramp is, around the bowling club is where the precinct is. We're looking for stage one. Obviously, the later stage of the project is Land White Reserve, which is option 2, which is formalising car parking there. And as we provided in the April 2005, was a process we're looking with the bowling club to future-proof car parking in that area with an option of number 2, option 2 there for additional car parking area, because we actually disperse stormwater onto that area, which if they ever sold it off, we'd have to fix the stormwater anyway. So when Councillor Warhurst, I suppose if you look at where the existing boat ramp is, there's a gas line that runs parallel with that the boat ramp. Where the shelter is to the left-hand side or the southern side of the boat ramp will then align straight through that process. So we'd have to do some work in around that area. And you can see that there's a bit of a curved pathway there to the deep river mooring. That will have to be then realigned to then meet up with what the new levels are in that area. And then another dolphin, there's the dolphins out in the river there now. Part of this project also is there's a small portion of a wharf, which is a DIT, Department of Transport Infrastructure. It's their wharf. They were very keen to actually partner with us to get us to do the project as well and fund their portion of it. So there is an option that we can actually then rejuvenate that whole area through this whole one project.
So the Swan Reach got to be totally finished before you start Blanchetown?
We've already started Blanchetown because we've got $100,000 of due funding to start the design.
On groundworks.
Yeah, I would suggest in the next round of funding, it would be coming up with due that we would then pursue the same process as what we're doing.
Again, we don't have, it's about funding.
Yeah.
We've got the design funding. So the next stage of the duty constraints measures project is where we hope for funding to deliver Blanchetown. And so that's
Probably more my question was, if you had funding for both, would you have both going at the same time, or would you finish Swan Reach before you move to Blanchetown?
Our discussions with SADFAC in the early piece were that they have a limited bucket of funding. So they would be looking at funding one project here, and obviously they look at the coastal areas as well, another project. So they have a limited bucket. So then they look at what they're going to do over a period of time. So they plan their budget.
If we had the funding,
yeah,
from wherever,
could we do it?
What could we do both at one time, or we would have to finish one from a project resource perspective? And
no, you could do them at the same time if you had the money there now.
Yeah, and you use external contractors.
Yeah. So that's the basic design for the area. As like I said, the realignment of the area, the footpaths, the deep river mooring, and the expanse area. There is a small land acquisition around the bowling club, where the bowling club encroaches on that. We're looking at a minimal amount, 200 mil, 300 mil area, and also some car parking along the side of the bowling club as well. And the bowling club also raised their issue about their own car parking for individual cars, so we've actually been able to allow for that as well. As I said, the DIT are looking at the old wharf. It's their responsibility. They were very keen to look at it. On the wharf is local property pumps. DIT have actually already conversed with some of the pump owners, and if it was to gain momentum, then we'd have to look at how we work with DIT on rejuvenating that area as well. So basically, if it's successful, we're going to confirm our funding commitments and then finalise all the approvals. The current stage one now is going through the development application process, and it'll hopefully be approved or otherwise very shortly, and then we'll start going on to procurement. So in a nutshell, site one was looking at the sites for car parking and what we're planning for the future. The site 2 and site 3 are future-proofing that area to make it a regional hub. And then obviously we've had discussions with a lot of different parties and third-party areas and all key stakeholders in regards to this, and now it's going to have public consultation through the DA process.
A report from the council. We obviously want to flag this in advance. Timing of that report might be dependent on another discussion item today as well, and we might have a special council meeting or potentially wait to May, because we would like, in addition, if SADFAC supports the funding applications of $2.3 million, that we can get cracking. but we obviously wanted to seek feedback from council or the position with you prior to you getting a report, Cole. So that's where we're at. Thoughts, questions?
Great announcements.
I'm actually just blown away at what actually costs to put the boat ramp in. I was thinking hundreds of thousands or maybe into like 1 or 2 million, but yeah, almost 5 million. That's
It's not a boat ramp, like it's the whole.
yeah.
But at one point, how much do you give your boat ramp, Dave?
Sorry?
The boat ramp.
Well, for the $1.3 million, we'd have to demolish the old one and then put in the dual lane boat ramp and then build around that area and then be able to provide part of the car park. So that's 1.3 million. That's the extent of the 1.3 million.
Pontoon.
Pontoon, we're looking at hopefully bringing that into the play because you'll obviously have to put a pile on there for the pontoon as well and then another dolphin out as well, which is what we're looking at doing.
What the pontoon look like? Is it Nil Dotty has a pontoon?
Pontoon, the central pontoons generally run down the centre, obviously the centre of the boat ramp. But what they do is they sit on the top, very similar to what Cadell does.
It's like you do.
And Port Wentworth's the same. So basically, the pontoon, you step up on the pontoon,
Yep.
as the water comes up, the pontoon raises.
Yeah.
So generally, you basically you step up onto the pontoon, walk down the top of the pontoon, and get into the water level, and you're still about that far above it.
Thanks, Dave. Straight on to your next one, which is the waste recycling service review rollout.
Okay. On this one, basically what we're looking at doing is obviously putting a report to council as to where we're at. You want to check up the reports on where we're at. So I suppose this is a bit of a briefing as to what we've been able to do in the process. And as Clive mentioned earlier, it was the bidding service fee. There are a lot of anomalies around that. And we're working through that with Solo and I suppose the industry as a whole. But what we want to do is, I suppose, confirm an adopted staged approach. It's so, I suppose just confirm the way we want to, I suppose, engage with this, look at the considerations and obviously the communication process moving forward. So we've done a fair bit of background work in regards to this, and we've tabled quite a few items associated with trying to get everything mobile. Probably in the last couple of months, we've obviously had issues where we've had to get legal advice on the service fee and how the service fee provisions are, because once they're set, and how we would then engage if we were to do it in part of a calendar year, not a financial year.
So to clarify that, Dave, make sure people understand. So we obviously set service fees at the budget process. And so the question that we've had to establish is whether we roll something out, say, the new calendar year, so January, and how you can pro rata that service fee because you're setting it at this period of time, and we've had some advice which we feel like we can. So that dictates timeframes and implementation. Make sure that we can do it rather than 1st of July on different things. So sorry, I'm not stealing any of your thunder, Dave.
So we've got a working group going now in regards to working through this, but again, Solo sitting over here as a contractor, they've got some of the implications with service delivery and their ongoing costs as well. Not so much with this providing the service, but being able to, I suppose, meet the requirements. So what we're actually proposing is there was a couple of elements of expanding the service from township to urban, and then also looking at the recycling into the rural area, and then a green bin system. So we're looking at a 1 July rollout for basically a major part of the project, but in the interim, looking at various avenues of what we can pursue. As I said, Section 155 of the service fee, we're looking at a pro-rata stage roll. So if we went from an area, then obviously if the fee is set at 1 July when you set the rates, let's just say $300, and then you put another bin charge on, so another extra $100, you can't charge $400 from now. But if you roll it out in 1 January, you would then invoice and charge $50 for the remainder of the year. So it's pro-rated. Similar to when someone builds a house halfway through the year, says, I want a bin, so we pro-rate it. Okay? The other issues we're actually now facing is obviously the material costs for the contractor or their contractual costs. And we were only notified yesterday that the bin, to manufacture a bin, they've gone up by, I think it's about 17%. because it's petroleum based. Also, the fuel levies are having a massive impact as well. So they're considerations that we need to take when we are actually going to tender. So we are still working through the process, and we've got a project plan in place. Paul the young has actually worked on a bit of a Gantt chart that will come shortly. It'll be very difficult to read, but we can send that out. But then obviously we're still just working out a phased consultation process and a phased rollout, and then that gets us to get through the lessons learned as we do it as well. So we have to get better as we get through the process. So Paul has produced, there's two pages of this, a bit of a working document as to where we're at and what we've been able to do and what the status of it in very detailed form. And obviously then we've still got a lot of holes to fill on this side as to work through the process, so then we can reassess how we did it, what we did, and what are the lessons learned as well. So this will come out in the next report is, I suppose, the recommended stage of the process to give us the best practice for the rollout. Also, the capacity of the contractor and the manufacturer to make sure that we're okay. To do the expanded service, we actually contacted Solo to say, how many bins do you have available if we want to do Madam Waters now? And they said they've got the bins available. So we said, right, we'll write an order and we'll lock those bins down. So we'd actually start moving on those things. Unfortunately, I think they've got a lot of things on their plate too. We haven't heard back that they've made those bins available. We've raised an order to try to commit, but that's where we're at. So we are trying to work close with the contractor to make sure that we don't get any more hurdles. Also, in regards to the contractor, they also have some other contractual issues like driver shortages, which they're looking at obviously trying to address. And then they've obviously got their fuel levy, which everyone's hitting industry with now.
Turn back to that slide, please, Dave. So look, it's a challenging environment, and we're looking to do this with increasing costs, availability of materials and supply chains. We don't know what, and Clive touched on this, what are the costs going to be for bin, say, the existing service, because fuel costs are going up. And on the driver shortage, they've come to us and all of their customers across the country say they are struggling for a workforce. And so additional rollout, additional things will be played out in that. There's a bit of a...
Many constraints.
Yeah. And so what you're looking, first instance, is to roll it out in those near township places where you can do it reasonably quickly. Subject to bins and the cost of bins going up. And then we have a staged approach for the rest of the...
And also, if we do a staged approach through here, we'll already have the bin charge set, and it's a matter of then knowing what it'll be. Then we can invoice them, and it'll be a softer impact if it was done in 1 January. There's only 50% of the service for that year. So there's the other factors that we're trying to look at as well.
But they get the bill on July, right, notice?
They get their current service from July, and when we implement the service, if it was 1 January, then we invoice them for the extra part of that service.
Yeah, flag it.
And we need to consult with them about that.
I think Dave's point was that rather than say there's an extra, just making it figure out, $100 charge, then in the first year of the rollout, it would only be $50 because we'd roll it out for half a year.
If you get that charge in July, you're going to be pissed that you're not getting a bid.
Oh, no, yeah, we're not going to do that. We would pay. You'd only get, that's where we've had to take advice. You'd set the fee for the service that's been provided, knowing, and then in the communication to say that we'll flag this, that there's going to be an increased service and cost whenever it's implemented.
And just touching on what Ben was just leading to there, obviously there's a lot of other factors so obviously there's a lot of other issues that are compounding to this, and obviously with the rate setting about where we're at, that it may be a softer approach rather than obviously trying to rush. So as probably alluding to is we're just working through our timing for consultation. We've got the okay to go consultation, but it'll be a staged approach. Looking at extending into the urban areas and then setting a time frames for the stage rollout, and then the confirmation of the pro rata rates, what that'll be, and then also the contractor availability to be able to provide those areas. And by doing this, we believe it's probably a little bit more responsible and probably reputationally a better outcome. And then as a factor behind this, as Paul alluded to when we had the briefing before, that once we start diverting our recyclables away from landfill, we still have the same cost over landfill. So what we're looking at in the background is also pursuing a solo about bringing more waste from the Barossa Council into our area so we can supplement that income so that we don't go above 10,000 tonne. We're just trying to keep that gapped. And we did it probably about 4 or 5 years ago. Well, I think we made about $400,000 out of Barossa waste. So if we can do that, bring that in, then our unit rate per tonne goes down, which then can offset the diversion that we're taking away from the landfill. So there's a couple of elements to this whole project. So again, basically, as I said, we've ordered some bins. We're not yet confirmed. We obviously want to be able to lock them down and we'll make sure that we actually have a bin supply so that if we can roll something out, we can do it. They won't be fine-grained or embossed, but it'll be a process that we'll at least have bins to be able to service those areas. And then obviously we'll go through the full consultation and hopefully we'll be in a position where we can actually then formalise what we need to do.
Just go back to that slide, sorry. So looking at, let's say ideally, rolling out to the near townships or the whatever term you use for them, let's use Madam Water Conservative. Yeah. When would that ideally, 1 January?
Ideally, yes.
Subject to availability of bins and costs and all the variables that we've just talked about.
Yep. And I suppose when you start looking at the rollout for the rural areas, I suppose what we've looked at is the best time to roll something out, probably in the regional area for the shackies, for the holiday home areas, is probably in that same time because they're actually going to be there picking it up and taking it back to their house. So that's an element we've looked at, but we don't want to obviously postpone too much. But we've looked at probably the factors that might influence how the timing of our rollout. So you've basically probably touched on the commentary there. I will send this out as a email to you. So any queries or any questions, there will be a setting out how we do this.
Which will include a timeline in the report.
And a showing of the phase stages of who will be included in which stages of the living. Because that'd be important, I think, for us to be able to go back to our community and let them know an idea of where we'll see traction.
Yeah, it will be subject to the availability of bins.
Yeah, obviously.
Because obviously we're looking at probably 6,000 to 8,000 bins when we do go to manufacturing. So there's a lot of that's the biggest context. But if we can get say 200 bins now, 200 double bins, then we can actually do Madam Waters and probably a couple around the area and probably ratify some matters around Dutton and probably Truro and Embark. So they're the sort of areas we're just looking at now without trying to really dip our toes too far in the water.
Dave, you're happy with the process as it's going?
It's the uncertainty through the whole time has been the ability of Solo bringing it all on and our ability to meet all the timelines. We met with Solo probably back in February and said, well, what can you do? And they just said, they used the experience of a neighbouring council and said, let's just get it right.
And the thing with the current environment, Andy, it's just changed so significantly with availability of bins, and we don't want to roll this out and not have bins.
Not to complete it.
That's fine. That's right.
Yeah.
We can't have some and not all.
I'm very supportive of the process that you
Yeah. And the costs. The other thing is, we need to know what the costs are going to be for probably not the first rollout. Like that's reasonable, but it's the broader one where fuel's gone up. You saw the figures in the last 2 quarters. Now that may come back down. We had a discussion in our working group that we do on the fuel situation is the prices go up quickly, but they don't seem to go back down at the same level. They probably don't go back to the original level as well. Like your chips when they used to be 500 grams and now they're 300 grams the same price.
I did get petrol for $1.90 a litre in Adelaide on the week. So that's
Unleaded.
yes.
Yeah.
It was actually E10.
under $2, the cheese.
So, I think to Dave's point, we do want to roll this out. There's a lot of community pressure to want as well.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. Yeah, that's right. There is, but we need to make sure it's right, and the price point needs to be right because it's great to say, hey, we want recycling, but when it costs.
So much money.
But the amount of information that we put out now in the consultation process is just, it's there for people to see.
Yeah. So I think our plan would be we'd have a council report date to May, and then we do a communication piece out to say, you know, things sort of, this is the timeline that we're looking now, so that people aren't, because we've obviously flagged in advance we were going to do the consultation because it's March of the day, February's coming. But the world is a different place to when we started this process.
Well, a couple of people that are eagerly awaiting that public consultation.
Yeah, I get consultation. I get quizzes.
So I think
I was hoping it'd be done by the time I got back.
the key message in is that, you know, given the changing world environment, there's been some, you know, other elements we need to consider, and one of them is access to bids.
Getting it right.
Right, thank you, Dave. Geez, we didn't set this up very well because you've gone bang, 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 bang. So you're on again for.
We could flip it.
Do you want a break, Dave?
No, I'm not wrong.
Service levels.
Yeah, service levels.
Good services.
What we've done with service levels is because we were, from an infrastructure point of view, we were aiming very high and trying to look at the function and trying to marry the function up. And when you start looking at open space or marine facilities, it became very, very difficult to try to describe what we're looking at doing. So what we've been able to do is probably go down to a sub-function. So what we've got here in boat ramps, you've probably saw this, I've refined this since the last presentation, but I've got another couple more under here. And these are probably topical at some times with people, where they'll ring us up and ask us questions. And if we can knock some of these on the head as our service level, it actually gives us the direction of how we go about some various aspects. So basically what we're looking at doing is obviously with the service outcome is obviously we want to be managing our expectation of boat ramps, how we treat boat ramps, what we do and what our maintenance frequency will be. So yeah, you'll have to scroll. So it's a discretionary service. We don't have to provide it. But where we're looking at present, actually it should be non-essential. Sorry. I don't know how that got there, but it should be a non-essential in BCP. But if you keep scrolling down, what we're looking at doing is obviously we've tried this in the last 12 months. Is putting in place where where the teams will go around and they'll do a frequency plan. We generally get, I suppose, calls about boat ramps all the time, about what they're like. We do have some still works to do through the flood remediation, but this is on the perfect world where everything's in good nick. But we're looking at doing a pre-seasonal inspection in October and a post one in April. So we visit it twice. And what we do is we do a full clean-up, clean the ramp, clean whatever we need, get rid of debris. We can't do a lot in the water, but obviously we try to do where we can around those areas, check signage and so forth. So we've got our Class A's. Obviously, Class A's, we're looking at 2 visits a year. Class B, so they're our regional areas. Class B are our district or local sites. And when you get into Class C, they're the local ones where basically they might be the if you use that boat ramp. And then we've got a Class D, which are very, very informal. Like, so people will just back up to the side of the river and throw things in, and then they ring us and say, can we have a boat ramp? So they're the localities, the classifications from our infrastructure and asset management plan. And from here, you're looking at the operation. So how we're looking at doing is we'll do our cleans at that April time and then an inspection in our October. And then the signage, how we treat the signage. If there's any safety lighting, like there is a one at Nil Dotty and various other areas. So we'll just make sure they're operational and what we would do in those jobs. So basically that will give us what we do, how we do it and when we do it for boat ramps. If we need to do any more, there will be times where like propulsion pushes the base of the boat ramp out. We'll have to address those as we go. But we'll work on those through a process through scheduling rather than reactive. So that's pretty much boat ramps in a I suppose a form.
And Dave, you'll share this with the members prior to our report coming back.
Yes. Yeah. So you'll get these as well. So this is just a bit of a process and it links back to our river facilities asset management plan and also SADFAC strategic plan. So just scroll down, Darryl. SADFAC have their hierarchy of boat ramps, meaning they both have coastal and inland, and we've aligned classifications to those as well. So we've linked. So that's boat ramps. Moving on to street lighting. We've done a lot of work in street lighting by doing the rollout of the LEDs. But what we actually also get is requests, can I have a shield? Can I have this? Can I have another light? Can I have this? You know, and why don't I have a light out in front of my place? So what we're trying to do is say, okay, we've got two elements. We've got public safety and vehicle safety, but we've also got a dark sky element. So what we're looking at doing is, we scroll down, Carol, is putting in place the parameters of what we do. We've just rolled out all our street lights. They're all 3,000 kelvins. They've all got 360-degree shields. And we've also got smart cell, which will come into play in the 4 towns, which is in the precinct. So that's how we stay compatible with the dark sky policy. But then there's also some elements where we don't want to go out and keep installing lights, because obviously we're going to have lights built, and then it could have an effect on our accreditations. And also we do get requests, I need security out front of my place, can I have a light pole, can I have this? So what we're putting in here is the parameters of what we believe will be okay for council to remain as a status quo for street lighting, except for where new land divisions come on to play. So land division comes on, we get street lighting, and generally they're very well low rated. There's a rating of V1 to 5 and a P1 to 5. Their vehicle and pedestrian land divisions are a very low rating, so they shouldn't have a major effect. And so these are the parameters we're hoping to engage with and apply to what we do and how we deal with street lighting requests. Moving along. Dog litter dispensers. Major bugbear for us. Just to give you a bit of an idea, we just ordered last week $700 for dog bag dispensers. We changed probably some over twice a week, some over once every 2 weeks. We've got 40 of them out there. The teams will drive around to do their jobs, and then they've got to go there because they'll get a complaint that they're out of dog bags. What we're looking at doing here is ratifying where we put them. They're present and some on land that we don't even have, like Blanchetown Open. So the two at Blanchetown, one's at the playground and the oval next to it, you wouldn't want to put a dog on it because it'll never walk again. And then if the one up the top oval is on private land, it's actually on sporting land. So what we're looking at doing is a reduction and only putting them where dog park specifics are. So we've got dog park in Truro, dog park in Madam. That's where we're looking at putting them. Because our teams will get a call, and then we're going to change the focus of what their routine works are to go put dog bags in. If we put them in yesterday, someone ring up tomorrow, and if someone's stolen them, they're gone. So again, with street lighting, giving us some parameters of what we do and how we do it and where they're going to be. So this is basically, in a nutshell, only where there's a specific dog park, which is actually an off-leash dog park, and that's where we put dog bag dispensers, because we've got them at ferry landings, we've got them at, on the side of roads, they're just everywhere. And it should be the dog owner's responsibility. I suppose when you go through your setting your fees and charges for Dayco, you're trying to recover costs, but this is a hidden cost for having your dogs.
Got people's thoughts? Interest.
It does.
Responsible dog owners know that they should take bags with you. We shouldn't be maybe at the start when there wasn't laws and things like that. There's laws now that if you dog poos and you don't have a bag, then you get fined. So
I do think Marianne Reserve should be one that we still consider, even though it's not a dog park, because it's a non-lead place, but that is definitely a place where a lot of people come up on their boats and stuff with their dogs into that very main thoroughfare.
When you go walk your dog, do you take your dog bag?
I always do, but there's always, like with anything, we're good people, and there's some people that just in the country let their dog just poo and just keep walking and ignoring it, and that happens in the city as well as the country. So, I mean, unless someone sees you and there's a witness to you, like
we've got CCTV down there.
Like a lot of people that ignore it, and I know they do. I think
How many bags get saved? Marianne Reserve,
Well, I suppose if you look at Marianne Reserve, what's the difference if someone says, well, I want one at Cadell because you want a Marianne Reserve? The person said, so then I look at open space, and that's how this has all evolved over that time.
I do agree with just the dog.
As a dog owner, I'm just thinking about me personally. Like, if I know there's a dog dispenser bag there, I won't take a bag with me because I'll get one. But if you don't know there's one, like, so you know there's not one,
Then you
then
take
take one.
Yeah, so lots of noticing, you're going to take them away.
Yeah. So I think you get conditioned to what you can do.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I have little things
There's one in-
dogs on the lead, but then I think when you see one where there's a dispenser where it has dispensers, like I can see how people then take 7 or 8 because they'll fill up their little bag that they've got, and that's what happens. It's like when you see one that's got some in there, people won't just take one for that one food their dog's going to do on that walk. They'll take 10.
They'll be there, they'll be full and then they'll be gone because
People
do
took
that.
20 or 30 and put up their bag. Yeah.
I've seen people pull up here, the one that's near my work, and they just take a whole heap, and they don't even have a dog anymore. And they're just taking a heap of bags out.
But people do use them for like their veggie bags.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Because they're biodegradable.
Gross.
Because they're biodegradable.
It's a bag, I know, but it's like.
Cracking that.
Okay. Last one is just another issue that we get.
To do that.
We obviously put traffic counters out for our own data collection. What that does is it picks up 12 classes of configurations of transport, the speed, the frequency, the timing, and collates it under the Australian data collection process. But what we do get is quite a few requests that, there's a speeding motorist down my road, I want a traffic counter so I can tell the police what the speeds are. Well, we don't do that. We shouldn't do that. We do a data collection so that we can plan our road network and work out what we want to do. So scroll down on this, very, very basic. All we're going to do is do traffic data collection for our own purposes and not for the purposes of speed because they're not calibrated anyway. They're calibrated to as best as practical on a road, but they can't be utilised for anything else. So we do get requests to say, okay, can you put it down on my road because I've got speeding motorists? The element we always do is if someone complains about speed, if you type in Google dog to driver safe hole, it comes up with a link. So that's what we ever tell people. So we're looking at, I suppose, just bringing some activities which are the nuisance activities and trying to knock them on the head. So to work through the sub-functions until we can actually build up I suppose, the full chapter of our activities and put them in place.
So Dave, a lot of information that you'll send out for some feedback and then a report comes in and you'll progressively work through the other. Just as background, so Gary's done his department, Clive and I have started ours and so he's working through his as well. And that's something. All right, thank you.
I have one question before you go on.
Sorry,
it's about the boat ramps. It was back in our first presentation of those 3. There's this one boat ramp in Manor that I was just wondering, is it obviously not one of ours? We don't ever talk about it, but it's that one that's like there's a car park and it's kind of near the
house.
That is ours, right?
It's worth a lot of money.
There's a car park and there's a boat ramp there. No one's ever there. You see the boat ramp.
No.
I've never seen a boat launch there, but people park their cars in that car park a lot. That's an off-street park.
Murray Street? Which one are you talking about?
That's on Main Street.
Yeah, Murray Street boat ramp.
Yeah, that's wasn't on your list there, but it is one of ours. Yeah.
And the blocklet next door is for sale. It's think about half the size for about 800,000.
And I think it's on our list.
That's right, yeah.
And the pontoon with
All right, 12:15. We'll start again. So Gary got a presentation on the community engagement charter and the draft community engagement.
While we're waiting for the presentation to come up, I will start. So save some time. So just by background, first slide was just reflecting on the fact that there's been some reform with the local government sector around participation on election review and engagement outcome report released in June 2024. And on the 3rd of May 2025, the Office of Local Government Police draft local government community engagement charter for public consultation. And at the time, Council did provide a submission on that draft back in June 2025. Since then, the Community Engagement Charter and all related amendments to the Local Government Act 1999 were published in the South Australian Government Gazette back on 11th December last year. So effectively, we now as councils are required to fulfil the new requirements of the community engagement process. So under new section 50A of the Act, councils must maintain a community engagement policy that complies with the Charter And before council adopts, alters or substitutes an engagement policy, council is required to take public consultation for section 50A. So as I said, so the charter has been adopted. So there are transitional provisions that are in the legislation, which requires gives councils 9 months on the 11th of December to ensure its policy is now consistent with the new charter and the amendment to the Act. So on that basis, we've looked at the new charter and the requirements, and the LGA have finally provided a policy template which councils could utilise to develop their policies with. But before I talk to that, the next slide was just going to just highlight some of the key components of the charter. The first is categories. So the charter identifies set categories being significant annual business plan and rating policy. Then, thank you, Carol.
Just make it size. So this
Play.
So the categories, so then there's significant. So these decisions that council make that have a significant impact on most ratepayers. Then we have standard decisions, then we have local, and then we have simple informed categories. So in utilising those categories, the matrix then outlined mandatory requirements. So in the charter, there is a specific table that outlines what are the mandatory requirements and to which of those categories that requirement applies. So this is a snapshot. So you can see, for instance, that a website public information must be provided across all categories of engagement, whereas a public notice, public news publication only applies to significant annual business plan and rating policy or significant. And so that runs through all the different requirements for the charter. Then there's also a table that legislative matters to which these apply. So in terms of what are significant, what are standard, what are informed. So again, they've got listed in sequence order of the Act. So for instance, representation review under section 12.7 is a significant engagement, whereas the community engagement policy consultation on that is only a standard engagement. So as I said, the LGA
Carol could believe that's why it's
working either way. Thanks for thank you. So yes, the LGA produced a template to assist councils to fulfil its requirements with the charter. So basically, it's a very standard sort of policy content. If you just press the next arrow, Carol, it's got some elements in there. So then there's the engagement requirements. Again, this is a straight representation of the table that is in the charter. That's the point.
Oh, no, now.
That's coming to the point. Right. See you later, ladies.
And then what the template has as well is a section on other decisions, activities and processes. So what is important to note is that the charter only applies to engagement that council undertakes under the Local Government Act. It does not apply to other legislation. So in the template, they included this section that actually then picks up on other parts of the Local Government Act that actually do have engagement requirements, but are not actually specified in the charter. So this clause is there to pick up those elements. Next slide. So For the purposes of that, the template has this appendix, which is a fairly comprehensive table that captures both the charter requirements and those other elements of the Local Government Act that do require some level of engagement, even down to the simple fact of informing, and whether there is a public notice or a gazette notice required as part of that section of the Act. Councils then have the ability to populate columns of this to meet the types of activities that it would wish to undertake as a minimum, whether it be a public notice, doing a workshop, doing fact sheets, things like that. They can populate that column. So anywhere where there's a blue square, effectively councils can populate to reflect their desired minimum for engagement. Doing that, I think next slide. I've taken a slightly different approach with the draft policy that I circulated to members. If you were to populate both tables, this policy would probably be around 40 pages long.
Thank God you did that.
And to a certain extent, it is repetitive if you have the charter table and the appendix table in your policy, because it does double up to a certain extent. Some councils have opted just to incorporate the charter table. Others have, I think, gone through and utilised just the appendix table as an option. In the policy that I've circulated, as I said, the charter is only applying to the requirements of the Local Government Act.
Can you give us an example of, that we do that is not?
Yep. So there's the public consultation around the Disability Access Inclusion Plan. There would be engagement around the Regional Public Health Plan. Then there is also the engagement requirements under the PDI Act. So there are other pieces of legislation that council would undertake engagement as part of its normal operations. Template the charter do not apply to those activities. So next click. So my suggestion is to incorporate a clause in terms of scope that does acknowledge that there's additional matters that council does undertake consultation for, but it's very specific that excludes the PDI Act. And the reason why I specifically said that still be excluded, because it has its own community engagement charter. So the charter there is very different from this charter. So it's more appropriate that anything under the PDI Act is excluded from this policy, because anything we do under the PDI Act in terms of engagement would be undertaken in accordance with the charter under the PDI.
So the third dot point captures things that we want to do
that are beyond the charter.
Yeah. So it gives us some scope.
Gives us some scope.
You don't have to do this, but we feel it is, and then it gives guidance.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Next slide, thank you. So in terms of structure, rather than having it in a table format, I've simply converted it into dot points where I simply say, significant applies to these instances that the charter describes, and these are the minimum standards that are required. Again, straight out of the table format in the charter, but just in a dot point format, easy to read for the general public.
So on the paper, the newspaper advertising.
Yes.
So that's prescribed for certain elements.
Yes.
And then others it's discretionary.
Correct.
That gives us discretion.
Correct.
Then where we're doing something we don't feel like we want to spend the amount of money, we can do that. But for example, in the actual business plan, it's strong.
Yes. Correct. Next slide, Matt. Thank you. So again, just to make it clear, and just go to the next slide point. Again, I've just included under significant the ability to recognise those other plans that do have consultation requirements. So the Disability Access Inclusion, the Dog and Cat Management, and the South Australian Regional Public Health Plan. So again, there's one or two ways of dealing with this. These plans could be recognised as a suite of our strategic management plans, which council would have to formally resolve as a strategic management plan. Therefore, the second dot point would automatically pick these ones up. but then it has other implications for Clive in terms of the long-term financial plan, annual business plan and budget process. So simply having as additional dot point, just recognise that the council will apply the standard process for those three pieces of legislation for engagement purposes.
And if we may not need it there, we have another, which we could do it to that standard.
Yeah.
But it'll be at the discretion.
Yeah. So basically we're picking up on the legislative engagements, but then there are other projects that are not in a sense of the legislative. So again, with Dave's waste services, in terms of our tourism precinct planning project, those engagements are done sort of separate potentially to this policy or in being consistent with policy. And then same thing with the other decision activities and processes, rather than having as a table, I've simply as a table in the appendices, I've included just listing of all the requirements under that section of those relevant sections of the Act that require some level of information to be provided to the community. Next slide. So yeah, that just sort of follows on. And then the engagement methods, this just highlights the things that we may do. So it's not a comprehensive list. It simply identifies things that we may choose to do in terms of notifying the community about the engagement or the activities that we're undertaking. Yeah, those elements there, and they're grouped under inform, where we're simply informing the community, those where we are consulting, and then those that are participatory in nature. They'll be applied accordingly. Any questions? So the intention now is if you're comfortable with those yellow bits, particularly being included, a report will be presented to the council at the next meeting to release this for public consultation. Now, just confirming too in terms of timeline, so we've got, like I said, the time frame to have this in place in line with the new charter from that 11-month period. So the idea is to try and have the policy adopted before caretaker commences, with the notion that it commences 3 months after it's adopted. So while it would be endorsed prior to caretaker, it doesn't take effect until 3 months after the adoption date. So our current policy will apply to all engagement up until that 3-month period expires. So we've got plenty, we still always have a policy in place. Just means we'll do the engagement on this policy, have it adopted, but all other engagements will continue to operate under our current public consultation policy.
Thanks, Barry. Very comprehensive. I love your pop outs too.
I love pop outs. I love a grab.
Raising the word art up today.
Challenge accepted.
Let's see what the next slide.
So can I get a general sense that people are comfortable with the yellow being included?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Next one.
And I'm impressed with your Brady Bunch pop-ups as well. Just then, it'd be.
We all get back.
On to the next topic is the Renewable Energy Community Benefit Sharing Policy and the public consultation outcome.
Yep. All right, so we went out to consultation on the draft policy. So this works now. Yeah. At the end of the consultation, we received 5 council agency submissions, 6 submissions from the renewable companies, 2 community group submissions, and 10 public submissions. That's a good response. I mean, we sent out 68 letters directly to key stakeholders. So that was.
It sounds good.
I still think it's good.
That's still very good. That's good.
Yeah. So, in terms of who we wrote to, we pretty much wrote to key government agencies, all our adjoining councils, all the progress associations, and RDA, Landscape Board, so we went quite broad with our distribution to get this policy out and about. In terms of the responses, also Foundation Bros was the other agency we sent to. But in terms of the YourSay website, we had 183 views and 48 downloads of the policy. So again, I think that's a pretty good response.
Engagement, yeah.
In terms of what was said, and sort of highlighting the key themes, I won't read this in detail, but just highlight that obviously the governance administration model for the community benefit was probably one of the key feedback, both in terms of the renewable companies, some of the community feedback, and Foundation Barossa themselves. The question around priority for host or directly impacted communities versus the broader council distribution. The whole premise of this was obviously to share some of that money more broadly beyond the footprint of individual projects. The policy was to still allow renewable companies to do their direct funding to those communities that are impacted. And this was just taking a small portion that could be distributed more broadly. Understanding of how that policy and the intent of that policy, Nat and I met with quite a few of the renewable companies to talk through the policy and what it meant. So there was a little bit of probably some confusion around that element, but I think we got sort of a general understanding, and those submissions were then reflective of that. There was definitely feedback around the voluntary nature of the community benefit agreements. So again, a lot of the renewables, well interstate that they are required to meet this requirement. And here in South Australia, we don't have that statutory base. There was still a feeling that there should be some voluntary nature, and that was the full intent, and that was clarified. And then the question around the threshold funding. So again, we've utilised the New South Wales guidelines, and again, the renewable companies acknowledged that we had. And so there was a little bit of questions around that, in particular around the dollars per megawatt rates, and suggesting that some of them were too high for some of the infrastructure. I think it was mainly around the solar. We had very good feedback from the Department of Energy and Mines. It's fair to say we're the first council in South Australia to even consider such a policy, because the legislation is silent on the requirements, and they actually were quite positive in our action to actually develop this policy, and they are letting councils sort of drive their own agenda in this space. So that was a very positive feedback that we received from them. Now, I've set you a huge table to read. Hopefully you've listed it all and read it all. But it is very difficult to present now a final policy without knowing what's the preferred model going forward. And so based on some of the feedback that has been received, I've tried to sort of consider what are the three principal models that we would potentially want to pursue. Now, effectively, the first model is what the policy intended to drive. So the concept is that the renewable companies will still be able to contribute directly to their community that are closest to their project footprint. And we would negotiate, so again, that voluntary notion that they would contribute to a collective fund. That might be anywhere from 5% up to 50, 80%, depending on their willingness. Again, taking interstate examples where some councils are receiving 85% of that community benefit fund from their projects. So then the notion is that it would go into the community benefit fund, which is under the auspice of Foundation Barossa. They would take their 2% annual fee calculated on the balance. They would then allocate 4% as an annual allocation once the fund reaches greater than $20,000. So that was thinking was one thing that wasn't very clear in the early phase of this policy, but it's very much that you would only distribute funds from that foundation once it reached minimum 20,000. And then that was to be directed towards that broader distribution for the community to apply for. So there'll be an annual grant program once that quantum reaches 20,000. So that's the equity going beyond the life of the renewable project potentially. So the second model is really based on the submission that we received from Foundation Barossa. And basically the suggestion is that we talked about the equity and the pass-through, the 80-20, that effectively whatever we get from the renewables, whatever percentage of their contribution they're willing to give us, we would distribute that 80-20, but the foundation would manage the entire amount. So they would still put 20% into a future fund and they'll put 80% into a pass-through fund. That pass-through would be allocated annually because it obviously would be the higher value of money, whereas the future fund is like the first model that eventually when it reaches 20,000, it would just be able to contribute to that community fund opportunity.
Very can I clarify?
Yeah.
The 80%, 20,
Yep.
is it the 80% from the money from the renewables?
Yeah, so if the renewables gave us 50% of theirs, that 50% quantum is 100,000, then 80% of that go to the pass-through and 20% will go through to the future fund. So it all depends on what we were able to negotiate with each individual company as to what that quantum would be. So it's case by case, individual, and it might be that, you know, one renewable saying, well, we'll do a community benefit agreement day one, another one might do one in year 7. So again, it's because of that flexibility and voluntary nature of it, we won't necessarily guarantee all that investment into that collective fund from day one. There are added costs associated with this model. So the fact that Foundation Barossa would be managing the collective fund, so both pass-through and the future fund, they would then have their 2% administration fee on the future fund, but then they have a series of management fees that would apply to the pass-through fund. And in their submission, they indicated around about $8,736 per year, and there'll be an hourly rate of $84 for any additional tasks that would be required in managing that fund on behalf of the community and council.
And what happens to that money? Those fees?
That goes to the
Foundation.
That goes where?
To them.
Administration fees
to managing it.
So they would
They got a CEO.
distributing that in their own area.
Yes.
We'll distribute it to their salary costs,
Their staff.
their
Staffing costs.
staffing costs.
To
Resources.
run the
Foundation.
to run the foundation.
Yep.
So they're remunerated members.
Yep.
You said they're 4% annual allocation, but then you said 2%. But 4%.
2% is the fee,
Oh yeah, they're fee. Okay.
and 4% is
Yeah,
the
annual allocation. Sorry.
Gary, just can you go back to the first slide, the model 1? So there's no pass-through there, right? Because that's you're only doing the future fund.
go to the future fund. Yeah,
Because the other's managed by the actual energy company
Correct.
in this model,
yes,
where we don't have to
Yeah.
lose any funds on it.
correct.
Yeah.
They managing it on their behalf.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, their own.
Have they be on a bonus scheme if they, they can accumulate the fund? And what if the performance is terrible and we're paying them?
Yeah, and that's the risk.
Yeah.
So the final model, and this came back through some of the renewables, is why does the council just manage it itself through our current community grants program. So effectively, we would receive funds as council, we would invest it through the LGFA, again roughly earning about 4.4% interest from what Clive indicated, and then we would distribute it through our current community grants program and our current Section 41 governance structure. So that's the third model, and that's that came in some of the submissions from some of the renewable
And
companies.
Gary, that would just be on the money. Let's say it's an 80-20 split, and they're doing theirs, and then they're giving us 20%, which is voluntary, they're making us nothing.
Correct.
And then that would go up and down.
Yeah.
So would we be then looking at full cost attribution for managing all those funds through the community?
Well,
However,
we would be obviously just managing the one fund. So in terms of the community grants program, it would be depending on what we get on an annual basis. we would run that through our normal Section 41 process, our probation and assessing applications in a similar vein. We may choose to alter the 41 membership to potentially have external representation because again, some of the renewables still want to have a say in some of that distribution. So again, in this model, we would have to think about the terms of reference of 41.
There wouldn't be independent as such, which is what the foundation does, but there wouldn't be any huge additional cost to us because we're doing a process anyway.
Yeah.
It's just we put 50 grand in. That 50 grand may be on top of 25 that's come from the distribution carry, or it might actually fund the 50 grand and council then use the other monies.
So this model here you're showing us on this screen, this is just for the 20%, the 80% they're in control.
So what
the 100%.
It's whatever the companies choose to give us.
Yeah, what they choose to give us,
Yes.
not of their funds.
Yeah. So the whole concept of this was not to prevent them from doing their direct benefit program, because that was the thing that a lot of the feedback was a concern that we were asking for the whole 100% of what that value is. It was never that intention. It was always about just taking a percentage that we can redistribute more broadly
in our community. Yeah.
Because this was, and I know this comes straight back to the Mayor's motion today, is in terms of if these renewables were
Option 4.
Just pay rates.
Yeah.
And then we don't need to do this.
Exactly right. If we have that, then we don't need to do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The objective is to try to distribute some of the funds across the whole region, because
Which rates would do.
rightly so. They're investing their money into targeted areas. So what's the areas impacted?
But interstate, they still have community benefit funds, even where they pay rates.
They do both.
Yeah, and it's legislated.
It's legislated.
It's legislated.
Yeah, so if that
So there,
happened here,
if we look at the Queensland jurisdiction, the first thing that they have to do a social impact assessment. So they actually have to do that before they get their approvals. They then have to establish a community benefit agreement before they get their approvals. So all this has to be established prior to them actually getting their permit to construct.
and that's got nothing to do with the rates they might pay.
Yeah.
So
we're
I don't think we need to
negotiating.
consider that as either or, sorry.
No, sorry, so we're negotiating with a company, and they are sort of doing this on their own back, really. Like there's going to be a contribution to council, and then depending on what we do with that. So that's where it's the voluntary, and that figure could be $10 or it could be $100,000, and then it's how we manage that.
And this is the only model where council has a say. And it's a model where we don't pay $8,000.
So it's one
plus costs.
The foundation is set up, it's got governance, it's got all of
I'm
that.
not saying there's anything wrong with their model, it's just a question of whether we want, and I'm just interested in what you guys think, whether we want to just hand it all over and just pay because like a consultancy to make it easier.
So,
Will there be concerns about it?
so with Model 3 going on the board now, does that mean that any funds that come through, 100% of whatever funds come through go towards 50 grants?
So yes, we would run it through our community grants program. The renewables might put some criteria around what it should go towards. So again, this is the thing we go look at what grant programs we offer.
Next question.
They definitely want to have some co-branding around this. So again, we would have to acknowledge that this grant is being provided by council and
in partnership
with
the energy company.
Correct. So they would definitely be wanting some branding.
There is a cost to council in that that's extra work. There's a whole new policy because that grant has to go to Palmer and Tunkilo. There has to be a whole policy on that, and the staff will have to spend their time just on that, and that means something else within community that's being done.
I think in terms of how that works is going to be, like case by case, in the sense that, like one of the submissions was very much that they acknowledge the fact that they've got their direct contribution. They're happy to give money towards this collective fund, but they would like to have some sort of say around how broad it is spent. So in the sense, if it was sort of, say let's pick like a 20 kilo one,
Yeah.
They may not necessarily want to see that money spent in Cadell.
And that was my question, like this model here, that money won't necessarily go to proponent 1, 2 or 3.
Right.
So these people that are having this infrastructure, it could go somewhere else. There's no guarantee.
There's the funds, 80% of their funds, whatever percentage of their funds still going to those areas.
So there's still, like the companies are still running their own community development benefit funds.
So let's use Harbour Wind Park, for example. So that their current program has 4 streams. So they've got a wellbeing program, they've got an education component, they've got an energy subsidy component, and they've got a community grants component. They have a 5th one, which is around First Nations people. Now, most of these companies are trying to hide that component separately. So they have to do a lot of stuff around First Nations. So that's sort of already been isolated in terms of their thinking. How they're doing the others is up to the engagement they've done. So Tilt come up with these 4. So in terms of the community grants program that they're running, they've got a value that they're going to allow per annum. Now, what we're saying in this model is whatever that per annum amount is, what percentage of that are you prepared to give to this collective fund? So they're still running their individual stuff. That's going to benefit the Palmer, Tunkillo area.
That's what I was worried about, thinking if that's not going to happen, that's not going to
We'll start up here because we're all going to that area and we're thinking for the outer wider area that then there's other things like the accessing services in Manat say.
So the people of Sedan and Canberra can apply for these grants to do things within their area, acknowledging that with that co-branding, the renewables have contributed to that project.
Yeah, that's right. I was concerned that wasn't happening. I'm thinking it's not fair.
No.
It's like
This is not stopping them.
Go somewhere else.
But and they said it's up to the individual companies to source what they're prepared to contribute.
On top of.
We've had positive engagement with a couple of them. They're actually very open to this concept. Others have sort of said, well, it's good, but there's a few little sidelines as outlined in their submissions. So fundamentally, all the renewables are supportive of having a policy. I think it comes down to which model they prefer the most and what aligns the most with what they're seeking to achieve. I think reading in the submissions, there's less support for the foundation model.
I can see that.
I can see why too. Yeah.
So the question then comes to council, is your willingness to pursue this 3rd model? Because if we do, then my response to the submission tail will have to be on the basis of what is the preferred model. And if this is the preferred model and a report come back to council based on today's conversation, we may need to do a 2nd round of engagement because we are fundamentally changing what the policy intent is. So if I was to rewrite the policy to reflect this model, it's different and we should go back out again.
Can we see model number 1 again, just quickly on the screen? Because I know number 2 was all about the foundation, but model number 1 was also
about foundation.
It was also about the foundation being involved too. So both involved the foundation, but the difference was just we didn't know the percentage of the second one.
No, the second one manages the whole distribution.
The whole of it, and then I'm going to 20 hours. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So Gary, sorry.
That was my question answer.
The thing is voluntary. So we could be doing this work and then there'd be no contributions from any of the parties.
Yes.
Now we know that probably not the case, but
I would say at this stage we have Iberdrola who are very supportive of the policy and contributing to model like this nature. We've got Tilt who are running their own program but are open to a future contribution to this model. You have others who have indicated a general awareness and willingness. but have no formal commitment. And there's probably one who at this stage says, well, maybe in year 7, we might think about contributing. So it will, I think third model allows better flexibility given that uncertainty. Because yes, the foundation model, the annual, the annual allocation of 4% can only be achieved once you reach $20,000. If you have, and this 20,000, and I think I presented in the last workshop, modelling that they did required about 120,000 contribution a year to reach that 20,000 in year 20. So
I think even if we like the foundation, but also concept, if it grew like crazy, we could do that later.
Exactly, we could
look
adopt
at
that
that
later.
as a part of the developmental process. It doesn't lose it out by not doing it now.
And this was part of the reason why we did approach the foundation, because they were willing to auspice a fund on our behalf to the point that, eventually down the track, if we wanted to establish our own charity foundation, we could.
It's either that way around or this is the other way around. We start it, see how it goes, and decide then to go ahead.
Gary, we need to raise advice if there's any legalities around receiving the funds and distributing them.
Us receiving it. Because I said it happens in the state, but there's obviously a statutory.
They're voluntarily giving it to us.
We've used money in the past. We've been given money and then used it for a project, like the lighting project. So we just need it.
So the foundation, so what areas do they invest in?
Their funds.
They've got homeless, they've got domestic violence, they've got low socioeconomic.
They invest in equity.
Are you talking about where they invest their funds in? Oh, yeah.
Who knows? They've got someone financial advisory on their board.
I just thought that there was, and it may have been the previous Local Government Act, which prohibits purchasing equity into private companies.
I suppose what Gary and any feedback is looking is that how the report is presented is quite different depending on which one. Now, I want to be clear, we're not making decisions.
So, but if I'll write a report based on direction that, options, and, if option 3 is the preferred model, then I would be saying that there will be a second stage of engagement, probably a bit more specific, tailored, probably to the renewable companies. I think in terms of the broader community feedback we've received, a lot of the submissions weren't even related to the policy. It was just about, not happy with renewables. And so, I would suggest a more targeted engagement with the renewable companies. And then obviously, if it is option 3, then it's going back to Foundation Barossa and explaining how we landed into the position we have and not pursuing it if that was the case.
I think with if option 3 is looking at what I would sort of like is that detail around who's going to sort of do it,
Who's been engaging with it?
How it's going to be done and the funding of it and the requirements in there, because obviously it'll be part of we're already doing it under this section, the grants committee, but it'll be additional, and that's what I would like to see. And I know that's really difficult to think, but I think that to me, it's pivotal. Pivotal.
I think in terms of, what the changes are is obviously the available quantum per year. So obviously council provides a 50,000 grant per year, which is not always fully subscribed.
So that's changing too. Like it used to be 100,000. That's 50. If something else happens, it might go.
Yeah. So, this contribution from the renewals might mean that we have a, quantum of 100 or 150,000 per year pending. And so then that means that the value of grants that we give individual projects could go up. So, because obviously a 50,000 quantum only allows you to spread, small amounts to 10 projects. where if you've got same 10 projects, you've got 150,000, you can potentially, and any unused would be rolled over.
I guess my question as well, we've got so many energy companies here, like Swan, and we've got Manum Solar and all of them, like if we have them all putting in funds of what they choose voluntary into our resources for, say, a community grant pool, we're then going to see like a tilt grant, Manum Solar grant. There might be about environmental, like you know, like you said, they might put their own parameters of what they want that money to be going to within our own grant coordination, or that one has to be something to do with the environment, or that one has to be something to do with renewable.
It might be that, you know, through that negotiation, you know, we obviously provide sports grants, golf grants. You know, they might say we won't specifically support any environmental program.
Yeah.
So if that's what they want, then any environmental. So we'll have a direct environmental program and under our community grants program. It might be that you know, there's a heritage grant, so that they who have currently a local public local heritage place can apply for funding to upgrade restore their homes, because at the moment, you know, there is no such grants in Mid-Murray.
Well, one thing I was going to say is I know with the tilt thing, like they had a certain amount of money they're going to give to the community, and like you said, it's a whole separate fund they've got for the First Nations groups in that area. And say Tunkulo and Palmer being two communities, the amount of funds that are going into that community grant is quite substantial, supposedly yearly. And they did already say that they didn't get enough grant application, even that small community, they had enough ideas, people to even spend some of that cash. And they did say that, if we roll over every year that doesn't meet its target, we'll just roll it over to the next year. So you could see in some of those communities just that allocation of funds that just that one company's got escalating to a point that is out of control for any progress group to then even think of how much playground equipment or events they want to put onto value. And that is where they're going to maybe get these funds from.
And this is where part of the community agreement is the concept of having conversations with Renewable around both, you know, soft and hard infrastructure. So at the moment, they're very much focused on the soft infrastructure. But in terms of community benefit, you know, some of that hard infrastructure that, you know, that Dave's team is really, you know, responsible for actually has huge community benefit. So stormwater, stuff like that. So, you know, their willingness to actually open their broadness in terms of what they're willing to spend coin on is exactly right. So if we are able to negotiate that, then that's better.
When we have these conversations with the energy companies, my one last question, sorry, is when we have these negotiations, we are going in with these different groups, obviously we're doing it all privately and like letting them all decide a voluntary amount. It'd be great if that could be in a panel discussion with them as a group of them to be able to actually then, you know, when they see how others are contributing, it might make some of those that think, we might put in $10, reassess how much they're going to actually put in based on the generosity of maybe some of them in the room, you know?
Well, I think the willingness to work together is quite strong already. Iberdrola and Tilt, the fact that they did a joint submission, they are having constant conversations. They're looking at how they're going to run consultative committees with the residents of the area. So they are trying to work, you know, as collaboratively as they can. And what I haven't covered in this presentation is that most of the companies were very supportive of the concept of a coordinator role. You know, so the idea of having someone who can become a liaison role for the community, the energy companies and councils. So that was well supported by quite a few of the renewable companies.
Okay.
So people have strong opinions that they want Gary to consider. Realistically, Gary, paraphrasing, there's a foundation model or there's a potential model where it's administered in some form by council through a community grants. That's people's.
That's my preference. I think
I like the three because when asked about funds being used for the grants, as you said, it's going to be 100% of those funds being used for the grants. So I prefer that option because all the money goes to the grants.
Yeah, I'm the same non-foundation model, so probably 3 as well.
Well, I didn't like the fact that the Barossa Foundation had the choice of what actual projects to fund. Not on in my book, so no.
Okay. 3.
I think we're all going 3, 3. 3, but with that detail. Yeah.
Agree with the sort of envision that maybe one day it gets bigger and maybe we do we have that support from Foundation for Ross for that.
And then the legal side of it. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, legal
I
side.
think we just need to also factor in whether we've got the staff capacity to move free by ourselves and what will go aside
Yep.
to continue
We'll
with
look
that.
at logistics, yeah.
Because this will be rolled out in council.
And they want to coordinate a role.
Well,
All right, thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. You've got sort of what you need to, and a council begin.
Next.
All right, the last item on the agenda is a confidential item. So just check with the